Corvettes once sat outside NASA, driven by astronauts, men preparing to leave Earth itself. America's sports car became part of the space race, a symbol of ambition, engineering, and speed. But decades later, the Earth opened beneath them. 8 Corvettes disappeared into a massive sinkhole inside the National Corvette Museum. Concrete collapsed, steel twisted, history fell into darkness. Some Corvettes reached for the stars, others fell into the earth, and both became legend. Welcome back to Dom's Diecast Vault, where diecast cars meet the history that makes them legendary. Today we're stepping away from simple collecting and diving into Corvette lore. Not just cars, stories. Because behind every Corvette casting sitting on this table, there's a real machine with history. Some of those stories are triumphant. Engineering victories, American performance at its peak. And some stories are disasters. First stop, the final frontier. We're talking about space, astronauts, and America's sports car. Because believe it or not, the Corvette didn't just conquer racetracks. It became the unofficial car of the space program. The Cold War was escalating. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik into orbit in 1957, proving they could reach space before the United States. America suddenly realized it was behind, and NASA was created to close the gap. At almost the exact same moment in history, General Motors was building something new, a 2-seat American sports car, the Corvette. 2 symbols of American ambition were born in the same decade, NASA, Corvette, and soon their stories would intersect. Alan Shepard was a Navy test pilot long before he became an astronaut, and he loved Corvettes. In fact, Shepard owned one of the earliest Corvettes, a 1953 model he bought from his father-in-law. He even drove a Corvette to astronaut training. Then came May 5, 1961. Alan Shepard climbed aboard a Mercury spacecraft and became the first American to travel into space, a national hero overnight. And General Motors rewarded him with a brand new Corvette. But one astronaut driving a Corvette doesn't create a legend. What happened next did. A Chevrolet dealer in Florida named Jim Rathman had an idea. He convinced GM executives to create a program allowing astronauts to lease new Corvettes for $1 per year. $1. 6 of the 7 Mercury astronauts signed up. NASA parking lots began filling with Corvettes. Astronauts comparing engines instead of rockets. These were test pilots, competitive, fearless, obsessed with speed. And the Corvette was the perfect machine for them. Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom even drag raced their Corvettes, but Grissom hated losing. So he secretly modified his Corvette with wider tires and a different rear end. After that, Grissom won every race. But the space program was dangerous. In 1967, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were killed during the Apollo 1 launch pad fire, a tragedy that shook NASA, and a reminder that exploration always comes with risk. Still, the Corvette astronaut connection continued. Apollo crews began ordering matching Corvettes. The Apollo 12 astronauts ordered identical gold 1969 Corvettes with mission-themed graphics. 3 cars, 1 team. Later crews ordered Corvettes in patriotic red, white, and blue. Astronauts driving America's sports car after walking on the moon. Machines built for Earth, piloted by men who left it. The $1 lease program eventually ended in 1971 as NASA grew concerned about commercial endorsements. But by then, the connection between astronauts and Corvettes was permanent. Even today, astronauts still choose Corvettes because the car represents something familiar to them: precision, speed, engineering, risk. The same qualities required to leave Earth. And when collectors look at Corvette die-cast models today, they're not just seeing miniature cars. They're seeing real machines with history. Cars driven by astronauts. Cars parked beside rockets. Cars tied to one of the greatest chapters of American exploration. And that's what makes them legendary. Before we keep going, take a second and look at what the Corvette really represents. This isn't just a sports car. It's American engineering, American risk-taking and American imagination. From test pilots to astronauts to collectors decades later, the Corvette has always been part of the culture. And we've got a lot more Corvette stories coming. The wild ones, the legendary ones, and the ones that sound almost impossible. So if you love cars with real history behind them, hit the like button and subscribe to Dom's Diecast Vault, because this is only the beginning. The earth does not warn you when it decides to open. No rumble, no countdown, no dramatic movie soundtrack, just silence. And then collapse. At 5:44 in the morning on February 12, 2014, inside the National Corvette Museum in Bowling Green, Kentucky, the floor suddenly gave up on reality. Concrete cracked like dry bone. Steel screamed. 8 Corvettes, icons of American performance, were swallowed whole. Not damaged, not tipped over, erased. Security cameras captured the moment the planet itself seemed to rebel against horsepower. The floor caves inward, displays vanish, dust explodes into the air. Cars disappear into a black pit beneath the building, 40 feet down. Imagine walking into a museum expecting chrome reflections and finding a crater instead, because that's exactly what happened. And the cars that fell were not random machines. They were milestones in Corvette history. The 1 millionth Corvette ever built, the 1.5 millionth Corvette, and the Blue Devil Z R1 prototype. A one-of-one machine lying twisted in darkness, paint scratched, panels crushed, history bent like cheap aluminum. Because cars aren't just metal, they're memory, their identity. And suddenly 8 time machines sat alone in a pit beneath the earth. The sinkhole formed because the museum sat on limestone cave systems. Water slowly dissolved the rock below for decades. Nature playing the long game, until gravity cashed the check. Some photos looked like an archaeological dig, like future historians discovering the Corvette civilization. Ancient artifacts with V8 engines. Museum staff arrived expecting a normal day. Instead, they found a disaster scene. Dust in the air, concrete everywhere, and a giant hole where history used to sit. But here's where the story changes. The museum refused to hide the damage. They turned catastrophe into legend. Engineers removed the cars one by one using cranes and straps. Some were restored. Some were preserved exactly as they fell. Because sometimes damage tells a better story than perfection. And the sinkhole itself? They left part of it exposed. Visitors can still look down into the pit today. Part engineering exhibit, part memorial, part warning. Corvette culture has always been about survival, and nothing is more rebellious than surviving the earth itself. The damaged cars became symbols. The 1962 Corvette was restored. The Blue Devil prototype was not. Why leave it broken? Because it tells the story better. Not every legend needs to be polished. Some legends need scars. The sinkhole became one of the most famous moments in Corvette history. Not because of speed, not because of racing, not because of horsepower, but because it reminded everyone, even icons are fragile. You can engineer a car to go 200 miles per hour. You can build engines that last decades. You can design machines that define generations. But you cannot negotiate with the earth. Sometimes the ground just opens. No warning, no mercy, no respect for horsepower. Just gravity, just darkness. Just 8 Corvettes falling into history. And somehow, that disaster became part of the Corvette legend. Because Corvettes aren't just about performance. They're about stories. And this one is real. From the edge of space to the bottom of the earth, the Corvette has been present in some of the most unexpected moments in American history. In NASA parking lots, Corvettes sat beside rockets, driven by astronauts who would leave the planet. And decades later, the Earth itself would open beneath 8 of them. One story about exploration, one story about survival, both part of the same legend.